The alien research ship Vathri Prime floated in the dark space above the old blue planet once called Earth. From space, the planet looked quiet and peaceful, but everyone on the ship knew the truth. The world was dead. Long ago, humans had lived there. They built cities, dreamed of the stars, and destroyed their home with their endless wars and hunger for power. Now only dust, ruins, and weak radio signals remained. The Vathri, an advanced alien race, had been studying Earth for many years. They were fascinated by one strange fact. Humans should have died out long before they did. Commander Sarath was one of the Vathri's brightest scientists. Her long silver skin shimmered under the cold light of the lab as she stood before a holographic display filled with scenes of Earth's history. She watched recordings of humans crying, laughing, fighting, and helping each other. To her, they were confusing creatures, illogical, emotional, and stubborn. "Every calculation says they should have fallen," said researcher Kalen, standing beside her. "Yet they always find a way to survive. Even when the oceans dried, even when the skies burned." Sarath folded her arms. Perhaps survival is not logic for them. Perhaps it is instinct. The Council of Minds wanted to know how. How could such fragile beings continue to live through pain and disaster? To answer that, they had created Project Immersion, a simulation that allowed a Vathri mind to experience life as a human, body, emotion, and all. Sarath volunteered first. She wanted to prove that human endurance was nothing more than random luck. When she woke inside the simulation, she was no longer Sarath of the Vathri. She was Ilara Stone, a human woman walking through the ruins of a dead city. The air smelled of smoke and metal. Broken towers leaned like tired giants, their glass windows cracked and dusty. The wind carried the sound of something rattling, a loose piece of metal swinging in the breeze. Ilara's body ached. Her hands were cut. Her heart beat too fast. She felt pain, a strange, sharp, real pain. It made her stumble. The Vathri never felt pain. Their bodies had long ago evolved past it. To Sarath, it was terrifying. She looked down at her trembling hands. "Why does this body hurt?" she thought. "Why do humans live like this?" A soft voice echoed in her head. The simulation system. "You are experiencing standard human pain receptors. Continue your mission. Survive." Survive. She began to move through the ruins, searching for food or shelter. The streets were empty. Burned cars sat like skeletons, their doors hanging open. A faded poster showed smiling faces under the words, "We will rebuild." Sarath, no, Ilara, did not understand that kind of hope. There was nothing left to rebuild. The world was silent. After many hours, she found a small store still standing. The shelves were half broken, but there were cans of food covered in dust. She picked one up, read the human writing. Beans. She didn't know what that meant, but she remembered from the memory data that it was food. She tried to open it with her weak human fingers. It took minutes. When she finally tasted it, it was cold and strange, but her body felt a little stronger. Night came quickly. The city grew darker and colder. Ilara wrapped herself in an old blanket she found and sat against a wall. Her stomach twisted. Her chest hurt from breathing the dry air. She looked up at the stars through a hole in the ceiling and wondered why humans had looked at the same stars and dreamed instead of giving up. That night she dreamed of fire, cities burning, people screaming, children holding their parents. The memories were not hers, but they felt real. She woke up crying. Sarath had never cried before. The wetness on her face frightened her. Days passed inside the simulation. Ilara walked farther, searching for any other human. She saw bones in the streets, half buried in dust. Yet she also saw small signs of life. A drawing on a wall, a child's toy, a single flower growing between cracks. Each one made her stop. Humans had left pieces of themselves everywhere, even when there was nothing left. One morning, she found an old radio still working, powered by a tiny solar cell. Static filled the air, but then a weak voice broke through. Someone was speaking. Survivors. North Valley. If anyone hears this, you are not alone. Alara froze. A survivor? Another human? Her heart began to race. For the first time, she felt something other than fear. Hope. She started walking north. The road was long, broken, and dangerous. The air grew colder every night. She scraped her hands and feet climbing over fallen bridges. At times, she wanted to stop. Every step hurt. Every breath was hard. Inside, her true body aboard the Vathri ship, Sarath's vital signs spiked. Her alien colleagues watched in worry. "She's pushing her limit," said Kalen. "End the simulation before her neural link collapses." But the chief scientist shook his head. "No, we need to see what happens when she reaches the human limit." After 3 days, Alara reached the North Valley. The sky was gray, heavy with clouds. She found a small camp, or what was left of it. Empty tents, cold ashes. But there was something else. A small notebook lying near the fire pit. She opened it. Inside were pages filled with human writing. The last page said, "If anyone finds this, remember, keep walking. As long as one of us is alive, humanity lives." Alara's vision blurred. Her throat tightened. She didn't know why, but tears came again. She hugged the book to her chest and sat by the ashes. Her voice trembled. Why did they keep going?" No one answered. The world was silent. She screamed at the sky. "I can't take it anymore. How do humans survive this?" The words echoed through the valley, bouncing off the cliffs until only the wind replied. In the control room of the Vathri Prime, silence filled the air as Sarath's voice came through the speakers. The scientists looked at one another. They had heard despair, but never like that, raw and full of life. Kalen whispered, "She's breaking." The chief scientist stared at the monitors showing Sarath's heartbeat. "No, she's understanding." Inside the simulation, Alara sat for a long time. The wind brushed her face. Slowly, she opened the notebook again and looked at the words about hope. Something inside her changed. The pain didn't fade, but it became lighter, easier to carry. She stood up. Her legs trembled, but she took one step, then another. North. Always north. Back on the Vathri ship, the scientists recorded everything. Sarath's brain showed waves of strong emotional energy. Grief, hope, determination. These were things no Vathri had ever felt. "She continues," Kalen said softly, "even when there is no reason to." The chief scientist folded his arms. "And that, researcher, is what makes humans dangerous. And beautiful." Alara walked until the sun rose. She reached a broken bridge and looked across a dry river. On the other side, she saw smoke, a small campfire. She didn't know if it was real or another trick of the simulation, but she smiled. Maybe there were others. Maybe she wasn't alone. The wind carried the faint sound of laughter, human laughter. Her eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were not from pain. They were from relief. "I can take it," she whispered to herself. "I can keep going." Back on the ship, the scientists watched the screen fade to black as the first part of the simulation ended. Commander Sarath's body lay still in the pod. Her heart rate slowly calmed. Her lips moved faintly, as if speaking in her sleep. Humans survive because they hope. The lab was silent. No one spoke. For the first time in centuries, an alien had felt what it meant to be human. When Commander Sarath opened her eyes again, she was still inside the human simulation. The sunlight was dim and red, filtering through dusty air. The campfire she had seen before still burned weakly across the river. Her body ached, her throat was dry, but her heart felt lighter. Somewhere inside her alien mind, she knew this pain was teaching her something no machine or book ever could. She took a deep breath and whispered, "Let's keep walking." Her voice was small, but filled with quiet strength. The path ahead was broken and rough. The ground cracked under her boots as she climbed down into the dry riverbed. Her legs shook from hunger, but she didn't stop. Every few steps she remembered the words from the notebook. "As long as one of us is alive, humanity lives." Those words pushed her forward. Meanwhile, on the Vathri Prime, the alien scientists watched her progress with uneasy fascination. Her emotional readings are rising beyond safe limits, said Kalen, his pale hands moving over glowing control panels. If we keep her there, she could lose her identity completely. The chief scientist replied calmly, let her continue. She is close to something important. The data is unlike anything we've ever recorded. Kalen looked at the screen again. She is not data anymore, she is feeling. The chief only stared at the monitors showing Sarath walking through the ruins of Earth, her human form stumbling yet determined. By nightfall, Alara, the human identity Sarath now wore, reached the other side of the river. Smoke rose from a small camp surrounded by fallen metal walls. She approached carefully, her heart pounding. A weak voice called out from behind one of the walls. Who's there? Alara froze. The sound of another human voice made her eyes fill with tears. I'm not a threat, she said softly. I heard your signal on the radio. There was silence for a moment, then the wall moved aside. A tall man with tired eyes appeared, holding a makeshift torch. Behind him stood two others, a woman and a small boy no older than 10. The man studied her face for a long moment. You're from the South Ruins, aren't you? Alara nodded slowly. She didn't know what to say. The memories of this world filled her mind like waves, each one more real than the last. The woman smiled faintly. You made it a long way. Come in before the cold takes you. Inside the camp, the air was warmer. A small fire burned in a metal barrel. The smell of smoke mixed with something cooking. Soup, thin and watery but full of life. The boy stared at Alara with wide eyes as she sat down. What's your name? He asked. Alara, she said quietly. The name felt natural now, no longer foreign. The man introduced himself as Rhett, the woman as Mira, and the boy as Tobin. They were among the last survivors, still sending radio messages to find others. We thought we were alone, Mira said, her voice trembling. Most people gave up long ago. But Tobin said we should keep trying. Tobin smiled shyly. Mom says hope is a kind of fuel. Alara smiled back, feeling warmth spread through her chest. She had never felt something like this before. Not the physical warmth, but the emotional one. It was fragile, pure, and powerful. That night, as she shared their soup and listened to their stories, something inside her heart began to change completely. These people were not strong because they had no fear. They were strong because they felt everything, the pain, the sadness, and still chose to love and laugh. When she lay down to sleep near the fire, she whispered to herself, This is how they survive. On the ship, the scientists watched as Sarath's neural patterns shifted. Her alien consciousness was slowly merging with the human identity. She's experiencing full emotional immersion, Kalen reported. Her empathy levels are beyond measurement. The chief scientist frowned. Can she still hear us? No, Kalen said. She doesn't even remember who she is anymore. Days passed inside the simulation. Alara became part of the small group. She helped gather water from broken pipes, repaired damaged tents, and taught Tobin how to light a fire safely. Every small victory felt like a great achievement, but life in the ruins was never easy. The weather changed suddenly, bringing cold winds that cut through their clothes. One morning, they woke to see the horizon dark with a sandstorm approaching. Rhett shouted, Cover everything. We'll have to wait it out. Alara helped tie down the tents while the wind began to scream. Dust filled the air, stinging her eyes. The storm lasted for hours, maybe longer. Inside the small shelter, the walls shook. Tobin cried quietly, clutching his mother. Alara held his hand. It's okay. We'll get through this. Even as the roof threatened to tear away, she spoke with calm certainty, and somehow that steadied the others. When the storm finally passed, the camp was half buried in sand. Their supplies were gone. The air was quiet again, but the silence was heavy. Rhett sat down and sighed. We can't survive another storm like that. For a long time, no one spoke. Then Alara looked at the small boy and said gently, We will. We always do. The words surprised even her. They came from deep inside, from the place where pain and hope met. Far above, the Vathri scientists were silent as they watched. Kalen turned to the chief scientist. Do you see it? She doesn't give up. She encourages others to live even when logic says they can't. The chief nodded slowly. She's learning what no Vathri ever has, the purpose of emotion. That night, while the others slept, Ilara stepped outside and looked up at the stars. They were faint through the dusty air, but still beautiful. She remembered the Vathri stars she had seen in her true life, cold and perfect without feeling. But these stars were different. They looked alive. As she stood there, something strange happened. Her mind flickered. A flash of her real self appeared for a second. She saw the lab, the machines, the other Vathri watching her. She whispered into the dark, "Is this real, or just a test?" No answer came. The night stayed silent. Then she heard a small sound. Tobin's footsteps behind her. "Can't sleep?" he asked, rubbing his eyes. Ilara smiled gently. "No, I was thinking." "About what?" "About how humans keep going," she said softly. "Even when everything hurts?" Tobin shrugged. "Because if we stop, no one will remember us. We have to keep walking so someone someday will find us." His words hit her like a wave, simple, honest, and full of truth. She knelt and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You're very brave," he smiled sleepily. "Mom says we're all brave. We just forget sometimes." The next morning, the simulation changed again. Ilara woke to the sound of the radio crackling. A voice spoke through the static. "Survivors. Heading east. We found water." Rhett jumped to his feet. "There are others." For the first time since the beginning, laughter filled the camp. Real laughter. They packed what little they had and began their journey east. Every step hurt, but Ilara noticed that pain didn't control her anymore. It became a companion, proof that she was alive. The road stretched endlessly, but she walked at the front, leading them through the wasteland. On the ship, Kaylin stared at the heart monitor. "She's pushing herself again." "She's beyond endurance," the chief scientist spoke quietly. "That's exactly what we needed to understand. Humanity does not survive because of strength. They survive because they refuse to stop." After many miles, Ilara's group reached a high ridge. From the top, they saw a wide valley below, glowing faintly under sunlight. Green. Real green. Plants, water, life. Mira gasped. "It's alive. The valley is alive." Tobin shouted and ran ahead, laughing. Ilara's eyes filled with tears. She sank to her knees, staring at the valley. For the first time, she saw proof that life always finds a way. She whispered to herself, "Maybe this is how humans survive. They never stop believing there's something better ahead." The wind carried her words away, soft and full of hope. Far above, in the cold laboratory, the Vathri scientists watched silently. Sarath's body trembled inside the simulation pod. Her mind was completely absorbed in the human world. Kaylin's voice shook as he said, "She understands them now." The chief scientist nodded slowly. "Yes, but when she wakes, she will never be the same again." That night, as Ilara rested near the valley's edge, she dreamed. In her dream, she saw her real self, Sarath, standing in the lab surrounded by machines. The two versions of her looked at each other. Ilara asked softly, "Do you understand now?" Sarath nodded. "Yes. Humans feel pain because it reminds them to fight." When she opened her eyes again, the first light of morning touched the valley. She smiled. "This is what it means to be human," she whispered. And for the first time, she didn't want to leave. The sunlight spilled over the green valley, warming the dust of a world that had once been dead. Commander Sarath, now fully immersed as Ilara Stone, sat at the edge of a small stream, letting the cool water run over her hands. The small camp behind her was alive with laughter and movement, humans working together to rebuild, sharing meals, and speaking softly to each other as they planned for the days ahead. It had been weeks since the journey east began. Ilara's body ached constantly, her stomach still hollow from hunger, but none of that mattered anymore. The pain reminded her she was alive. It was proof of life, proof of endurance. She looked at the faces of her companions, Rhett, Mira, and little Tobin, and understood what her alien mind could never have calculated. Humans survived not because they were invincible, but because they refused to give up, even when everything was against them. Ilara's thoughts drifted back to the pod aboard the Vathri Prime, the cold metallic lab she had left behind. For centuries, the Vathri had studied humans like a puzzle, observing their actions from afar, never imagining what it meant to feel as they felt. She had thought the experiment was about logic, data, and observation. Now she knew it was about understanding the unmeasurable: heart, hope, and courage. Back on the ship, the Vathri scientists were silent as they observed the simulation's final stage. Sarath's neural patterns had reached peaks they had never recorded. Her empathy, endurance, and emotional engagement exceeded even the strongest Vathri theoretical predictions. "She has changed," Kalen whispered, his voice low and awed. "She is no longer just a scientist, she is human." The chief scientist nodded slowly, though he said nothing. He had seen it too. The unmistakable transformation of a being who had truly understood humanity. But he also feared the consequences. No Vathri had ever allowed themselves to feel so deeply. Once the link ended, Sarath would return. But would she remain purely Vathri or carry the humanity she had lived through forever? In the valley, Alara helped Mira repair a broken shelter. Tobin ran ahead chasing a small lizard, laughing and calling back to her. Rhett was already setting up a small solar panel to power their meager electronics. "Look at them," Alara whispered almost to herself. "They are alive, and they keep going." Mira paused and glanced at her. "You understand now, don't you?" Alara nodded slowly, feeling the truth deep inside. "I do. Humans survive because they carry hope. They carry each other. They feel, and that feeling drives them to move forward, even when the world has nothing left to give." Mira smiled softly. "And that is why we live." A week later, a small shuttle appeared on the horizon, a reminder of the alien world waiting above them. The Vathri Prime had sent a retrieval signal to end the simulation. Sarath, or Alara now, felt the tug almost like a physical pull. The simulation could not hold her forever. She stood at the edge of the valley, looking back at the small human camp she had grown to love. Tobin ran up to her carrying a handful of flowers. "For you," he said shyly, offering them with a bright smile. Alara knelt and took the flowers, inhaling their fragile scent. "Thank you," she whispered. Her voice cracked. She had never spoken like this before, not as Sarath, not as Vathri. These humans had taught her a new way to exist. She felt the pull again, stronger now. The valley blurred, and for a moment the faces of Rhett, Mira, and Tobin were replaced by the cold, white walls of the lab aboard the Vathri Prime. When she opened her eyes, she was back in the pod. Her alien body lay motionless in the capsule, but her mind remembered everything: pain, hope, laughter, tears. All of it remained as real as it had in the simulation. The lab was silent. Kalen and the chief scientist watched her vital signs carefully. Her eyes opened slowly, silver irises flickering with something new. The cold, logical Vathri expression was gone. Instead, there was warmth, understanding, and a strange determination. She has survived it," Kalen said softly. "The simulation should have broken her. But instead, she understands them," the chief scientist replied quietly. "She understands what it means to be human." Sarath rose from the pod, her body weak but her mind sharp. She did not speak at first, only looked out at the observation window where the planet below waited silently. Finally, she turned to the scientists. "Humans survive because they feel. They endure because they hope. And even in the worst suffering, they choose to move forward." Her voice was calm, but it carried weight, an authority that had never existed in a Vathri before. Over the next days, Sarath could not rest. The data she had gathered was important, but it no longer mattered as much as what she had felt. She requested permission from the council to return to Earth, not as a researcher but as a participant. The council was stunned. "You wish to go to the ruins of a dead planet?" one member asked. "Yes," Sarath said firmly. "To see if the survivors still live. To help them if I can." Another council member frowned. "It is risky. You may contaminate yourself, you may never return to pure Vathri." She nodded. "I accept that. I have learned that humanity is worth the risk." After long deliberation, the council reluctantly agreed. A shuttle was prepared, carrying Sarath back toward the broken world she had lived in as Alara Stone. As she descended through the dusty clouds of Earth, memories of her human life flooded back. She remembered the pain of hunger, the ache of cold nights, and the fear of dying alone. But she also remembered the laughter of Tobin, the courage of Rhett, and the warmth of Mira's hand. She had lived humanity, not as an observer but as one of them. When the shuttle landed, Sarath stepped onto the cracked earth. The wind carried the faint smell of plants and water. In the distance, she saw the faint outline of a small human camp. Her heart leapt. They were still alive. Humans had survived. Against every expectation, against every calculation, they endured. The humans saw her first, their eyes wide and cautious. Tobin ran ahead just as he had in her dream. "Ilara!" he shouted, though she was Sarath. She knelt and smiled. "Hello, little one," she said. "It's me." Rhett and Mira approached slowly, unsure of the strange new being before them. But as she spoke of the lessons she had learned about hope, courage, and endurance, their suspicion faded. They understood. Somehow she had returned with the same spirit as the humans she had lived among. Together they began to work again. Rebuilding, cleaning, planting. Sarath felt every ache of the human body, every pang of hunger and every surge of hope. She knew now what humans endured every day, and she admired them more than she could ever express. That evening, Sarath stood at the edge of the small camp looking at the stars. She whispered into the wind, "Pain is not weakness. Fear is not failure. Hope is not a lie. This is what makes you survive. This is what makes you human." The wind carried her words across the valley. Somewhere in the distance, a small human song rose, a tune of survival, of laughter, of defiance. She closed her eyes and listened. For the first time, she did not feel like an alien observing humans. She felt like one of them, alive, enduring, hopeful. And above all, she knew the truth. Humanity survived because it refused to surrender to despair. Because no matter how much the world tore them apart, they found a way to keep moving forward, with courage, heart, and love. In the quiet of the night, Sarath made a vow. She would never forget what she had learned. She would never return to the Vathri as she had been before. Humanity had taught her something priceless, that the true strength of life lies in feeling, enduring, and believing. The stars twinkled above, and for the first time in centuries, an alien being felt awe and reverence. "Now I understand how humans survive this," she whispered, a smile touching her lips. And the valley, broken but alive, seemed to answer her with the soft, unbroken song of survival.